This is from Kefir.org, and it can be found under the thing with under Aquino, under recommended reading for Setians. And I want to make sure people understand this. This is actually not Aquino's work. This is a Special Agent Kenneth V. Lanning. And the reason why this is important, he's from the Behavioral Science Unit, National Center for Analysis of Violent Crime, Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI Academy, Quantico, Virginia. The reason this is important is because what people need to know is this myth, this satanic panic that has been resurrected by people like Alex Jones. This needs to stop. But it won't, because as noted by Anton LaVey in the Satanic Bible, Satan has been the best friend of the church because he's kept it in business all these years. Without the fear of Satan, a lot of people wouldn't really feel very motivated to do anything as far as religion is concerned. But let's go on here. So, the belief that there is a connection between Satanism and crime is certainly not new. In fact, one of the oldest theories of crime causation is demonology. Concern about satanic or occult activity has peaked from time to time throughout history. Concern in the late 70s focused primarily on unexplained deaths and mutilations of animals, and in recent years, now this is the thing, what you have to understand about the mutilations of animals, this doesn't have anything to do with Satanism. What this has to do with is traditional witchcraft, Wicca, not modern Wicca, but traditional witchcraft, Wicca, and voodoo and hoodoo that use animals in their rites, okay? Not modern Wicca, because people are going to be like, Wiccans don't do that. Yes, they do. And also, in some extent, so did Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley had sacrificed a goat. He talks about the use of sacrificing chickens and things like that. Animal sacrifice is present in many occult-based religions, but it is not, I repeat, not present in either LaVeyan Satanism or the Setian religions, as far as I know. So in recent years, it's focused on child sexual abuse and the human sacrifice of missing children in 1999. It will be probably focused, meaning in 10 years from now, it probably will focus on impending end of the world. That's funny. Who remembers that around that time, because of the year 2000, all that nonsense with oh, the end is coming, the rapture, blah, 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 dispensationalism, yada, 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 yada. Okay, so today, Satanism and a wide variety of other terms are used interchangeably in reference to certain crimes. This discussion will analyze the nature of satanic occult ritualistic crime and focus on appropriate law enforcement responses to it. Recently, a flood of law enforcement seminars and conferences have dealt with the satanic and ritualistic crime. These training conferences have various titles such as Occult in Crime, Satanic Cults, Ritualistic Crime Seminar, Satanic Influences in Homicide, Occult Crimes, Satanism and Teen Suicide, and Ritualistic Abuse of Children. The typical conference runs from 1 to 3 days, and many of them include the same presenters and instructors. A wide variety of topics are usually discussed during this training, either as individual presentations by different instructors or grouped together by one or more instructors. Typical topics covered include the following: historical overview of Satanism, witchcraft, and paganism from ancient to modern times, nature and influence of fantasy role-playing games such as Dungeons & Dragons, lyric symbolism and influence of rock and roll, heavy metal, and black metal music. Now remember, I pointed out there aren't really any Satanists in popular music, despite what people think. Number 4, teenage stoner gangs. Again, this is a mythological term. There's no such thing. I thought that was funny when I majored in criminal justice, when they were talking about neo-Nazi teenage satanic stoner gangs, their symbols, and their vandalism. Teenage suicide by adolescents dabbling in the occult. Crimes committed by self-styled satanic grave and church desecrations and murders. ritualistic abuse of children as part of bizarre ceremonies and human sacrifices, organized traditional and multi-generational. Now, this is what I want to point out with the ritualistic abuse of children. We saw a lot of this rehashed because of Epstein. I do think Epstein was inappropriately behaving with women and young girls that he trafficked for sex, okay? I do not believe that there was much in the way of ritualistic abuse taking place, although there could have been. One of my theories has been that people use ritualistic things during the abuse process of trafficked people to cover up the fact that it is it's being used for sexual gratification or something of that nature, as opposed to it actually being a case of ritualistic abuse. But that way, if the victim runs away and gets to the police and goes, "These people ritualistically abused me," they're less likely to be believed. But I do not believe that I don't believe there's any proof that there was any sort of ritualistic abuse taking place there. But I do believe that there was proof of people being trafficked for sex. 8, organized traditional and multi-generational satanic groups involved in organized conspiracies, such as taking over daycare centers, infiltrating police departments, and trafficking in human sacrifice victims. 9, the big conspiracy theory, which implies that Satanists are responsible for such things as Adolf Hitler, World War II, abortion, pornography, Watergate, Irangate, and infiltration of the Department of Justice, the Pentagon, and the White House. During the conferences, these 9 areas are linked together through the liberal use of the word Satanism and some common symbolism such as pentagrams, 666, demons, etc. The implication often is that all are part of a continuum of behavior, a single problem, or some common conspiracy. The information presented is a mixture of fact, theory, opinion, fantasy, and paranoia. And because some of it can be proven or corroborated, desecration of cemeteries and vandalism, etc., the implication is that it's all true and documented. The distinctions among the different areas are blurred. Even if occasionally a presenter tries to make them, this is complicated by the fact that almost any discussion of Satanism and witchcraft is interpreted in the light of religious beliefs. Okay? So, of most people, so if you're a Christian, you're going to think negatively of Satanism or witchcraft. As a result, some normally skeptical people, like law enforcement officers, accept the information disseminated without critically evaluating it or questioning the sources. Nothing said at such conferences will change the religious beliefs of the attendees. Such conferences illustrate the ambiguity and wide variety of terms involved in the issue. Definitions. The words satanic, occult, and ritualistic are often used interchangeably. It is difficult to precisely define Satanism with a capital S, and no attempt will be made to do so here. However, it is important to realize how the word Satanism with a small s is used by many people. Simply put, for some people, Satanism is a religious belief system other than their own. The Ayatollah Khomeini referred to the United States as the Great Satan. In the British Parliament, a Protestant leader called the Pope the Antichrist. In a book titled Prepare for War, the author Rebecca Brown, a medical doctor, has a chapter entitled, Is Roman Catholicism Witchcraft? Dr. Brown also lists among the doorways to satanic power and or demon infestation the following fortune tellers, horoscopes, fraternity oaths, vegetarianism, yoga, self-hypnosis, relaxation tapes, acupuncture, biofeedback, fantasy role-playing games, adultery, homosexuality, pornography, judo, karate, and rock music. Dr. Brown, this is actually funny. In the beginning of our martial arts classes, back when I was teaching martial arts like 20 years ago, there was a born-again Christian parent that was upset that we begin our classes by bowing in and then bowing to the American flag, and stated well, the American and the South Korean flag, and stated that was and we meditate for a couple seconds to clear our minds, and he stated that was indeed Satanism. Okay, Brown states, it's amazing. I'm glad they didn't know I was a Satanist. You can only imagine where that would have went. Dr. Brown states that rock music was a carefully masterminded plan by none other than Satan himself. The ideas expressed in this book may seem extreme and even humorous. This book, however, has been recommended as a serious reference in law enforcement training material on this topic. In books, lectures, handout material, and conversations, the author has heard all of the following referred to as Satanism: Church of Satan, stoner gangs, Ordo Temple Orientis, heavy metal music, Temple of Set, rock music, demonology, the Ku Klux Klan, which is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, mind you, witchcraft, Nazis, paganism, Scientology, Santeria, the Unification Church, Voodoo, the Way, Rosicrucians, Hare Krishna, Freemasonry, Rajneesh, Knights Templar, religious cults, New Age, astrology, channeling, transcendental meditation, holistic medicine, Buddhism, Hinduism, Mormonism, Islam, Orthodox Church, Roman Catholicism. At law enforcement training conferences, witchcraft, Santeria, paganism, and the occult are frequently referred to as forms of Satanism. It may be a matter of definition, but these things are not necessarily the same as traditional Satanism. The worship of lunar goddesses and nature and the practice of fertility rituals are not Satanism. Santeria is a combination of 17th century Roman Catholicism and African paganism. Occult means simply hidden. All unreported or unsolved crimes might be regarded as occult. But in this context, the term refers to the action or influence of supernatural powers, some secret knowledge of them, or an interest in paranormal phenomenon. Occult does not imply Satanism, evil, wrongdoing, or crime. Indeed, historically, the principal crimes deserving of consideration as occult crimes are the frauds perpetrated by fortune tellers and psychics, who for a fee arrange visitations with dead loved ones and commit other financial crimes against the gullible. Many individuals define Satanism from a totally Christian perspective, using this word to describe the power of evil in the world. With this definition, any crimes, especially those which are particularly bizarre, repulsive, or cruel, can be viewed as satanic in nature. Yet it is just as difficult to precisely define Satanism as it is to precisely define Christianity or any complex spiritual belief. What is ritualistic crime? The biggest confusion, however, is over the word ritualistic. During law enforcement training conferences on this topic, ritualistic almost always comes to mean satanic, or at least spiritual. Ritual can refer to a prescribed religious ceremony, but in its broader meaning refers to any customary repeated act or series of acts. The need to repeat these acts can be cultural, sexual, or psychological, as well as spiritual. Cultural rituals could include such things as what a family eats on Thanksgiving Day, or when and how presents are opened at Christmas. The initiation ceremonies of fraternities, sororities, gangs, and other social clubs are other examples of cultural rituals. Since 1972, the author has lectured about sexual ritualism, which is nothing more than repeatedly engaging in an act or series of acts in a certain manner because of a sexual need in order to become aroused and or gratified. A person must engage in the act in a certain way. This sexual ritualism can include such things as the physical characteristics, age, or gender of the victim, the particular sequence or acts, the bringing or taking of specific objects, and the use of certain words or phrases. This is more than the concept of MO, is something done by the offender. Oh, modus operandi. I'm sorry, I had to think there what MO would mean. It means modus operandi. is something done by the offender because it works. Sexual ritual is something done by an offender because of a need. So it's not done because it does anything besides the fact that the person needs to do it. Deviant acts such as urinating on, defecating on, or even eviscerating a victim are far more likely to be the result of sexual ritualism than religious or satanic ritualism. From a criminal investigative perspective, two other forms of ritualism must be recognized. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders defines obsessive compulsive disorders as repetitive, purposeful, and intentional behaviors that are performed in response to an obsession or according to certain rules or in a stereotyped fashion, such as compulsive behavior frequently involves rituals. Although such behavior usually involves non-criminal activity such as excessive hand-washing or checking that doors are locked, occasionally compulsive ritualism can be part of criminal activity. Certain gamblers or fire setters, for example, are thought by some authorities to be motivated in part through such compulsions. Ritual can let me see here. Ritual can also stem from psychotic hallucinations and delusions. That would be the case with Richard Ramirez. If anybody remembers Richard Ramirez, probably drug-induced psychosis, but there's probably a little bit of normal psychosis going on there too. A crime can be committed in a precise manner because a voice told the offender to do it in that way or because a divine mission required it. This has nothing to do with Satanism. This has to do with schizophrenia. To make this more confusing, cultural, religious, sexual, and psychological ritualism can overlap. Some psychotic people are preoccupied with religious delusions and hear the voice of God or Satan telling them to do things of a religious nature. Offenders who feel little, if any, guilt all over their crimes may need little justification for their antisocial behavior. As human beings, however, they may have fears, concerns, and anxieties over getting away with their criminal acts. It is difficult to pray to God for success in doing things that are against His commandments. A negative spiritual belief system may fulfill this human need for assistance from and belief in a greater power or to deal with their superstitions. Compulsive ritualism, excessive cleanliness, or fear of disease can be introduced into sexual behavior. Even many normal people have a need for order and predictability and therefore may engage in family or work rituals. Under stress or in times of change, meaning what that means, like say you get ready for work by lying your clothes out the night prior. That is a ritual, okay? Ritualistic crime may fulfill the cultural, spiritual, sexual, and psychological needs of an offender. Crimes may be ritualistically motivated or may have ritualistic elements. The ritual behavior may also fulfill basic criminal needs: to manipulate victims, get rid of rivals, send a message to enemies, and intimidate co-conspirators. The leader of a group may want to play upon the beliefs and superstitions. Remember, superstition is what the other person believes, religion is what you believe. So it plays upon the beliefs and superstitions of those around them and try to convince accomplices and enemies that they make the leaders have special or supernatural powers. The important point for the criminal investigator is to realize that most ritualistic criminal behavior is not motivated simply by satanic or religious ceremonies. At some conferences, presenters have attempted to make an issue of distinguishing between ritual and ritualized and ritualistic abuse of children. These subtle distinctions, however, seem to be of no significant value to the criminal investigator. What is ritualistic abuse of children? It is not an easy question to answer. Most people today use the term to refer to abuse of children that is part of some evil spiritual belief system, which almost by definition must be satanic. Dr. Lawrence Pazder, author of Michelle Remembers, defines ritualized abuse of children as repeated physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual assaults combined with a systematic use of symbols and secret ceremonies designed to turn a child against itself, family, society, and God. He also states that the sexual assault has ritualistic meaning and is not for sexual gratification. This definition may have value for academics, sociologists, and therapists, but it creates potential problems for law enforcement. Certain acts engaged in with children, kissing, touching, appearing naked, etc., may be criminal if performed for sexual gratification. If the acts were in fact performed for spiritual indoctrination, potential prosecution can be jeopardized. So do you understand that? So, what they're saying is, because you have a right to freedom, which I think this should be illegal, but then again, because I don't think that your religion justifies you breaking other people's rights. But in Wicca, people are some used to practice skyclad, meaning nude. I do not think that it would be appropriate for children to be present at a skyclad Wiccan ceremony and nude around adults. Okay, the adults have a choice to be nude or not nude. Okay, the children do not, because they're following what the adults do. However, trying to prosecute that becomes one hell of a problem because of the First Amendment, if you get the point. However, if it's being done for sexual gratification, it's very easy to prosecute because that would be an act of molestation. Okay, so the mutilation of a baby's genitals for sadistic sexual pleasure is a crime. The circumcision of a baby's genitals for religious reasons is most likely not a crime. Get that? So the genital mutilation would be a crime. However, genital mutilation, such as circumcision, in the practice of ritual, of a religious ritual like a bris, not a crime anymore. The author has been unable to precisely define ritualistic abuse and prefers not to use the term. It is confusing, misleading, and counterproductive. Certain observations, however, are important for investigative understanding. Not all spiritually motivated ritualistic activity is satanic. Santeria, witchcraft, voodoo, and most religious cults are not Satanism. In fact, most spiritually or religiously based abuse of children has nothing to do with Satanism. Most child abuse that could be termed ritualistic by various definitions is more likely to be physical and psychological rather than sexual in nature. If a distinction needs to be made between satanic and non-satanic child abuse, the indicators for that distinction must be related to specific satanic symbols, artifacts, or doctrine, rather than the mere presence of any ritualistic element. Not all such ritualistic activity with a child is a crime. Almost all parents with religious beliefs indoctrinate their children into that belief system. Is circumcision for religious reasons child abuse? Does having a child kneel on a hard floor reciting the rosary constitute child abuse? Does having a child chant a satanic prayer or attend a black mass constitute child abuse? Does a religious belief in corporal punishment constitute child abuse? Does group care of children in a commune or cult constitute child abuse? Does the fact that any acts in question were performed with parental permission affect the nature of the crime? Many ritualistic acts, whether satanic or not, are simply not crimes. When a victim describes an investigation corroborates what sounds like ritualistic activity, several possibilities must be considered. The ritual activity may be part of excessive religiosity of the mentally ill, psychotic offender. It may be a misunderstood part of sexual ritualism. The ritualistic activity may be incidental to any real abuse. The offender may be involved in ritualistic activity with a child and also may be abusing a child, but one may have little to do with the other. The offender may be deliberately engaging in ritualistic activity with a child as part of child abuse. The motivation, however, may not be to indoctrinate the child into a belief system, but to lower the inhibitions of it, like with the Catholic Church. To control and manipulate and or to confuse the child in all the turmoil over this issue, it would be a very effective strategy for any child molester to deliberately introduce ritualistic elements to, like I suspected earlier, It would be very effective strategy for any child molester to deliberately introduce ritualistic elements to his crimes to confuse the child and therefore the criminal justice system. The ritualistic activity and the child abuse may be integral parts of some spiritual belief system. In that case, the greatest risk is to the children of the practitioners. But this is true for all cults, not just satanic cults. A high potential of abuse exists for any children raised in a group isolated from the mainstream of society, especially if the group has a charismatic leader whose orders are unquestioned and blindly obeyed by the members. Sex, money, and power are most often the main motivators of the leaders of such cults. What makes a crime satanic or a cult? Some would answer that it is the offender's spiritual beliefs or the membership in a cult or church. If that is the criteria, why not label the crimes committed by Protestants, Catholics, and Jews in the same way? Are the atrocities of Jim Jones in Guyana Christian crimes? Some would answer that it is the presence of certain symbols in the possession or home of the perpetrator. What does it mean then to find a crucifix, Bible, rosary, etc. in the possession or home of a bank robber, embezzler, child molester, or murderer? If different criminals possess the same symbols are they necessarily part of one big conspiracy? Others would answer that the presence of the presence of certain symbols such as pentagrams, inverted crosses, and 666 at a crime scene. What does it mean to find a cross spray painted on a wall or carved into the body of a victim? What does it mean for a perpetrator to leave a Bible tied to his murder victim? What about the possibility that an offender deliberately left such symbols to make it look like a satanic crime? Some would argue that it is the bizarreness or cruelness of the crime, body mutilation, amputation, drinking of blood, eating of flesh, use of urine or feces. Does this mean that all individuals involved in lust murder, sadism, vampirism, cannibalism, urophilia, and corporophilia are Satanists or occult practitioners? So let me define what that means. So people know what sadism, vampirism, cannibalism, they know what those things are. Urophilia is, of course, an obsession with urine. Corporophilia, people might not know what that is unless they have any education in psychology or psychiatry, mental health nonsense. Most people should know, though. That means obsession with feces, in case you're wondering. What does this say about the bizarre crimes of psychotic killers such as Ed Gein or Richard Trenton Case, both of whom mutilated their victims as part of their psychopathic delusions? That should say psychotic delusions. Psychopaths are generally free of delusion. A few might even answer that it is the fact that the crime was committed on a date with satanic or occult significance, Halloween, May Eve, or the fact that the perpetrator claims that Satan told him to commit the crime. What does that mean for crimes committed on Thanksgiving or Christmas? What does it say about crimes committed by perpetrators who claim that God or Jesus told them to do it? One note of interest is the fact that in handout and reference material collected by the author, the number of dates with satanic or occult significance ranges from 8 to 110. This is compounded by the fact that it is sometimes stated that Satanists can celebrate these holidays on several days on either side of the official date, or that the birthdays of practitioners can also be holidays. The exact names and exact dates of the holidays and the meanings of the symbols listed may also vary depending on who prepared the material. The handout material is often distributed without identifying the author or documenting the original source of the information. It is then frequently photocopied by attendees and passed on to other police officers without one really knowing its validity or origin. Most, however, would probably answer that what makes a crime satanic, occult, or ritualistic is the motivation for the crime. It is a crime that is spiritually motivated by a religious belief system. How then do we label the following crimes? Parents defy court order to send their children to an unlicensed Christian school. Parents refuse to send their children to any school because they are waiting for the second coming of Christ. Parents beat their child to death because he or she will not follow their Christian beliefs. Parents violate child labor laws because they believe the Bible requires such work. Individuals bomb an abortion clinic or kidnap the doctor because their religious belief system says abortion is murder. A child molester reads the Bible to his victims in order to justify his sex acts with them. Parents refuse life-saving medical treatment for a child because of their religious beliefs. Parents starve and beat their child to death because their minister said the child was possessed by demonic spirits. Some people would argue that the Christian who committed the above crimes misunderstood and distorted their religion, while Satanists who commit crimes are following theirs. But who decides what constitutes a misinterpretation of a religious belief system? The individuals who committed the above described crimes, however, believed that they were following their religion as they understood it. Religion was and is used to justify such social behavior as the Crusades, the Inquisition, apartheid, segregation, violence in Northern Ireland, India, and Lebanon. Who decides exactly what Satanists believe? In this country, we cannot even agree that what Christians believe. Okay, that's why there's so many denominations of Christianity. At many law enforcement conferences, the Satanic Bible is used for this, and it is often contrasted or compared with the Christian Bible. The Satanic Bible is, in essence, a 150-page paperback book written by one man in 1969. To compare it with a book written by over 30 authors over a period of thousands of years is ridiculous. Even ignoring the possibility of divine revelation in the Christian Bible, what Satanists believe certainly isn't limited to other people's interpretation of a few books. More importantly, it is subject to some degree of interpretation by individual believers, just as Christianity is. The fact is that far more crime and child abuse has been committed by zealots in the name of God, Jesus, and Muhammad than has ever been committed in the name of Satan. Many people don't like this statement, but few can argue with it. So you might not like that, but yes, more abuse has been committed by zealots of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam than in the name of Satan. Although defining a crime as satanic, occult, or ritualistic would probably involve a criteria set forth above, the author has been unable to clearly define such a crime. Each potential definition presents a different set of problems when measured against an objective, rational, and constitutional perspective. Each offender in a group may have a different motivation for the crime. The author has discovered that the facts of so-called satanic crimes are often significantly different from what is described at law enforcement training conferences or in the media. The actual involvement of Satanism or the occult in these cases usually turns out to be secondary, insignificant, or non-existent. Law enforcement perspective. Okay, the perspective with which one looks at satanic, occult, or ritualistic crime is extremely important. Sociologists, therapists, religious leaders, parents, and just plain citizens each have their own valid concerns and views about the issue. This discussion, however, will deal only with the law enforcement perspective. The law enforcement perspective must focus on crimes and clearly recognize that just because an activity is satanic does not necessarily mean it is a crime or that it is not a legitimate religious practice protected by the First Amendment within the personal religious belief system of the law enforcement officer. Christianity may be good and Satanism evil. Under the Constitution, however, both are neutral. Get that? So yeah, Christianity might be to the Fed or the cop, yeah, Christianity's good and Satanism's evil. But according to the law, They're both neutral. This is an important but difficult concept for many law enforcement officers to accept. They are paid to uphold the Constitution and enforce the penal code, not the Ten Commandments. The apparent increasing numbers of teenagers and some adults dabbling in Satanism and the occult may be cause for concern for parents, school officials, and society. What, however, law enforcement can or should do about it is another matter. Police interference with free exercise of constitutional rights potentially creates major problems and conflicts. What is the justification for law enforcement officers giving presentations on Satanism and occult to citizen groups, PTAs, or school assemblies? Is it public relations, a safety program, or crime prevention? If it is crime prevention, how much crime can be linked to satanic or occult activity, and what do such presentations do to prevent the crime? Law enforcement agencies should carefully consider the legal implications and justification for such presentations. Is the fact that Satanism or the occult is or can be a negative influence on some people enough justification for law enforcement? When you combine an emotional issue such as the sexual abuse of children with an even more emotional issue such as people's religious beliefs, it is difficult to maintain objectivity and remember the law enforcement perspective. Some police officers may even feel that all crime is caused by Satan, and therefore all crime is satanic crime. This may be a valid religious perspective, but it is of no relevance to the investigation of crime for purposes of prosecution. Many of the police officers who lecture on satanic occult crime do not even investigate such cases. Their presentations are more a reflection of their personal religious beliefs than documented investigative information. They are absolutely entitled to their beliefs, but introducing themselves as current or former police officers and then speaking as religious advocated causes, confusion, or as religious advocates causes confusion. Okay, as difficult as it might be, police officers must separate the religious and law enforcement perspectives when they are lecturing or investigating their official capacities. As law enforcement officers, many law enforcement officers begin their presentations by stating that they are not addressing or judging anyone's religious beliefs and then proceed to do exactly that. Some police officers have resigned rather than curtail or limit their involvement in this issue, as ordered by their departments. Perhaps such officers deserve credit for recognizing that they could no longer keep their perspectives separate. Law enforcement officers who believe that the investigation of satanic/occult crimes puts them in conflict with supernatural forces of evil should probably not be assigned to these cases. They probably also shouldn't be carrying a firearm, but whatever. If, however, such officers must be or are assigned, they will need the power of their own belief system in order to deal with the superstition and religious implications of these cases. The religious beliefs of officers should provide spiritual strength and support for them, but not affect the objectivity and professionalism of the investigation. The law enforcement perspective requires avoiding the paranoia that has crept into this issue and into some of the law enforcement training conferences. Paranoid belief systems are characterized by the gradual development of intricate, complex, elaborate systems of thinking based on and often proceeding logically from misrepresentation of actual events. It typically involves hypervigilance over the perceived threat, the belief that danger is around every corner, and the willingness to take up the challenge and do something about it. Another very important aspect of this paranoia is the belief that those who do not recognize the threat are evil and corrupt. In this extreme view, you are either with them or against them. You are either part of the solution or part of the problem. Concern over satanic crime and ritualistic abuse of children is highly polarizing. After one presentation on this topic, a student wrote in a critique that the author was obviously an agnostic cultist. Some zealots even use the term clean to refer to law enforcement officials who have not been infiltrated by Satanists. If some police officers or military personnel practice Satanism or paganism, does that mean that law enforcement and the military have been infiltrated? The word infiltrated is only used when talking about an unpopular belief system. Protestants, Catholics, and Jews are no longer thought of as infiltrating the police. I think they might be, and military. But not long ago, the Jews were thought by many to have done so. Overzealousness and exaggeration motivated by the religious fervor of those involved in law enforcement training is more acceptable than that motivated by ego or profit. There are those who are deliberately distorting and hyping this issue for personal notoriety and profit. Satanic and occult crime has become a growth industry. Speaking fees, books, television, and radio appearances all bring egotistic and financial rewards. Law enforcement officers must be objective, fact finders. It is not their job to believe children or other complainants. It is their job to listen. The law enforcement perspective cannot ignore the lack of physical evidence, no bodies, or even hairs, fibers, or fluids left by violent murderers. Okay? The difficulty is successfully committing a large-scale conspiracy crime. The more people involved in any crime conspiracy, the harder it is to get away with it. And human nature, intra-group conflicts resulting in individual... Now, I want to make sure people understand this. This is large-scale conspiracy. This is why I don't believe in vast conspiracies. Anybody would know that when you have a ton of people engaged in the same conspiracy, it's much harder to keep it a conspiracy. By that, I use conspiracy in the proper sense, okay? I'm going to skip down to the facts. The facts are some individuals believe in and are involved in Satanism and the occult. 2, some of these individuals commit crime. 3, some groups of individuals share these beliefs and involvements in Satanism and the occult. 4, some members of these groups commit crime together. The unanswered questions: what is the connection between the belief system and the crimes committed? 2, is